Good evening and welcome to Stones and Thrones. My name is Nicholas A. Venna and this is my show. I analyze and talk about current events in society, culture, and political news in pursuit of the good things to which we can hold fast and build upon, stone by stone, until myself and like-minded individuals have thrones that last. Occasionally, I'll be responding to some stones that are thrown at me, and sometimes I'll be throwing some stones of my own. It's Saturday, July 18th, now late afternoon, and this is part two of what I started earlier today based off the primetime speech delivered by President Donald Trump on Thursday, the 16th. So we're picking up where we left off. We had gone over the speech. We went over the mainstream media's reaction to it. We went over some of the right-wing alternative media's reaction to it and the personalities there. And we talked a little bit about the actual Chinese interference, such as in the city of Arcadia, where the mayor there had admitted to being a spy for the Chinese government and siphoning information to them and planting information into the public conscious here in California to downplay the human rights violations going on in China for the advancement of China's interests in the world and here in the United States. So we pick up where we left off, and what I had promised was I was going to give you my take, my overall assessment, stepping back and taking a look at the big picture and helping to identify what exactly are we to do. That is, we, the retail information consumer, the retail level voter, the retail political participant, if anything at all. However, there is a trend, and that trend is a very persistent, very pervasive, not very persuasive, encouragement from influencers and politicians alike for political participation and political activism on the part of the run-of-the-mill, day-to-day, retail-level citizen in society as they go about their day and doing whatever it is that we all do. I want to take a look at the comment that ex-representative, Representative Emeritus, prior representative, Thomas Massie, maybe he still is, I guess he still is a representative, he has the rest of his term, but I'd like to start with what he said. He says, the problem isn't that recent elections were stolen, we won the damn elections. White House, Senate, House, even the Supreme Court leans our way. The fraud is that our party got elected and broke our campaign promises to voters. Massie went on to say, this is absurd. Every piece of voter data Trump mentions here, as well as which elections each voter voted in, is readily available in Kentucky for a small fee. So you have Massie in this second post providing the same talking points that the mainstream media is providing on behalf of the left. Further, both of these comments mirror and echo the statements made by Matt Von Swoll. Now, he's got roughly 538,000 followers. His bio says he's a former nuclear scientist for the U.S. Department of Energy, an ex-photographer for Apple at United Airlines, I suppose, and Hyatt. So it sounds like he did some freelance photography and got some projects with Apple, United, and Hyatt, only because there's no relationship between those three massive corporations, and it's not likely that he was working as a salaried employee for all of them at the same time. So got a photographer, nuclear scientist for the U.S. Department of Energy, Matt Von Swoll, and his 538,000 followers. So what he said was, in one instance, with one post, wait. China freaking hacked 220 million voter files in 2020, and our government covered it up? What are we even doing here? People need to go to prison. This is treason. In another post made by Matt Von Swoll, he says, I'm so fucking sick of the GOP. We can't do anything. Shut the fuck up. Shut, all caps with a period, the, all caps with a period, fuck, all caps with a period, up, all caps with a period. You have the House, the Senate, the White House, a Supreme Court majority, the most unified government you've had in years, and you're telling me you can't do anything? You have reconciliation. You know the filibuster-proof tool Democrats use to ram through trillions in spending with 50 votes. It's sitting right there. Do you morons understand what happens if Democrats take the midterms? It's over. Not tough, not a setback, fucking over. And then the fucking over is all caps. Every Doge cut, Doge is in caps. Did you forget you still need to codify those? Codify those is in caps. Into law. Executive orders, erased. Regulation cuts, reversed. Border policy, deleted. Years of work, torched in one election cycle because you kept saying, we'll get to it, like we gave a damn that you tried. Guess what happens when Democrats win, dumbasses? They start passing bills. They actually do everything you won't do for God knows what reason. You're telling me if they win, they won't nuke the filibuster on day one? They've said it out loud repeatedly on camera. Transgender plays in Uganda, back. Elmo in Afghanistan, back. NPR PBS funding probably doubled out of spite. ICE, defunded. DC and Puerto Rico statehood, yep. Court packing, they said so this week. Every single crazy thing you swore would never happen becomes a floor vote the second they hold the gavel. Because they actually use power when they have it. That's the difference between you and them, and it's fucking humiliating. Meanwhile, you can't even pass the SAVE Act. Requiring proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections is an 80-20 issue, the easiest layup in American politics. And God forbid you change some archaic Senate rules to get it done because you'd rather have the issue than the law. You won't defund the fucking Taliban. We're still watching taxpayer money leak into Afghanistan, and your response is a strongly worded letter and a subcommittee hearing nobody watches. What are we doing here? Don't tell me there's no time. The House is scheduled for barely over 100 legislative days this year. You work a third of the year. Teachers work more days than you, and somehow you still are finding room for even more vacations. God forbid you actually put in some effort. But no, instead you give us tweets, Fox News hits, cringe-ass TikToks, podcast appearances. Nobody gives a single fuck about your content. Not one of us. Zero. You're not influencers. You're lawmakers. So make some fucking laws. That's the job. It's all we've ever asked you to do. Trump won't be on the ballot next time to drag your sorry asses across that finish line. You really think you can come home, look us in the eye, and recycle the same excuses after this? No, not this time. The stakes are way too high and our patience is gone, completely gone. Stop telling us what you do. Quote, if only you had the power. You have the power right now, today. If you're too cowardly to use it, then stop fucking asking us for more of it. And don't act all shocked when the people you keep taking for granted stop showing up to save you from yourselves. So that was a post from July 16th, 883,000 views so far. And that pairing is what you got from Matt Von Swoll. So that's a great lead-in for what I want to talk about. Generally speaking, I don't disagree with his sentiment. I'm in support of the sentiment. I think it's accurate. I think it's the right sentiment. However, there are some presumptions in it that are not accurate. And the presumptions that are in it that aren't accurate strike at the heart of what is wrong and what is often, far too often, overlooked in American politics today. It's overlooked largely by the general population, but also by influencers, also by what are supposed to be political pundits, also by those social media personalities who are developing followings and have garnered followings and maintain followings based off the implicit and often explicit promise that they're keeping their finger on the pulse of things, that they are on top of politics, they are on top of political maneuvering, and they are the watchdogs, they're the noticers. And the reason why you're paying them with your time and energy, the reason why you're paying them with your focus and watching their content and liking their shit and sharing it and subscribing and following, the reason you're doing all of that ostensibly is because they are providing a service that allows you to go about your day and do the things that you're doing. Looking for a family, trying to start a family, already providing for a family, working your day-to-day job. And while you go about and you do that, they're doing the watching and the noticing. The politicians that they're telling you to lift into power are supposed to be doing the legislating, the enforcing of the laws, and the lobbying to advance your interests so that you can go about your day and live a normal life. And that's your job. And all that you are to do in exchange for this is when the time comes and the call comes or the knock on the door comes, you go to the polls and you vote. And you put down the name that you've been told to put down by the noticers and the watchers. Okay? So that's what we're looking at here. We already covered what the 5 previous ones said. Their talking points were pretty straightforward. Okay? It was Liz Churchill, Mike Davis, and Evan Kilgore, whatever the names of these people are, there was 5 of them. Benny Johnson with his 4 million followers. So now I feel bad for the one that I forgot. But anyway, we already talked about their talking points. Their talking points was we should revoke the license. Hey, FCC, we should revoke the broadcasting license from these major media networks. Why? Well, because they are suppressing relevant news that the public needs. And this news is relevant because we have foreign agents, foreign nationals, foreign countries, China, named, and they're interfering in our elections. They are undermining the very infrastructure, the bedrock of American society. They are undermining the fundamental principle of a government that is by the people, of the people, for the people. Okay? That's what America's supposed to be built on. They're undermining the balance of power because these politicians are coming in and they're, stealing elections. Basically, there's cheating going on. There's votes being cast not from valid voters. They're not registered voters, or they're not even alive voters, or they're fake voters, or there were real voters now gone or deceased and somebody else is voting in their name. Whatever the case is, okay, this stuff is all happening. And that's the talking point set that you get from that group. And over here, you have something a little bit different, but you do see the consistency between what Thomas Massie is saying and this Matt von Swoll. It begs the question, where are the levers of power? And this is my take. Where are the levers of power? What are the levers of power? Because the message that we're getting inundated with day in and day out, every election cycle, and then primed up in the space between the election cycles for the next election cycle, the message we're getting constantly is the power is in these branches of government. We need to vote in the legislators that are going to draft the laws that we need for a just society. We're going to vote in, at least locally, the judges that are going to properly and faithfully and in good faith interpret and apply these laws to legal decisions. And we're going to elect executives who are going to defend and enforce these laws for the good of the people. And so the message that we get constantly is that's our power. You have the power to vote. But that creates some issues because on the one hand, on the right, you have this message. ABC, CBS, NBC, the mainstream media, they are suppressing. They have suppressed, they have censored a speech from the President of the United States, a speech that is of national importance, that is a question of national security, that speaks to the very essence of our good society. It speaks to the fundamental principles upon which our society is built, upon which our Constitution is based, upon which our laws are drafted, and in light of which the laws are written, and in support of which the executives are enforcing and upholding these laws. So that's the whole thing. So if we have foreign interference in our elections, and foreign money is buying off politicians, and the media is censoring this information, not just from anywhere, but from the President of the United States himself, the duly elected leader of the free world who takes an oath to uphold the Constitution and the principles that the country is founded upon, and the principles upon which the country is admired across the West in a free world, the fundamental principle to the idea of a democracy and people being able to choose their own leaders. So these are the allegations, but you have something totally different from another pocket of the right, coming from Von Swoll, coming from Massey and other voices, and they have a different message to the right. Their message is, no, the elections are fine, nobody stole them, we won. But the politicians that we elected, they are not delivering on their promises. They lied. They are derelict in their duty. They are rejecting the mandate. They're going against the promises that they made. You elected them for a reason, and they are willfully, intentionally, and knowingly refusing to make good on the promises and commitments that they made you in exchange for your vote. But there's more. There's a third choir of voices coming from the left. And that choir says, there is a threat to American society. There is a threat to the fundamental principles upon which our society is built. There is a threat, an existential threat, a very serious threat to the Constitution, to our freedoms, to our liberties, to our pursuit of happiness. But in their eyes, the threat is the very government that we have. Their position is it would be potentially dangerous, careless, if not reckless, for us to broadcast the president's message, because his message is a threat to American society. He's not operating in America's interests. So you have these three voices, two of them from the right, one of them from the left. The left has no reason to be fractured over this issue. The right does have some reasons to be fractured over the issue. So you can see there are reasons why they would be fractured. And remember, we also talked about earlier, Alex Jones talked about the fact that J.D. Vance was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And on that podcast, J.D. Vance apparently said that there are fundamental issues with the government and intelligence, or at least as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein, and that Epstein was, in fact, in the employ of Israeli intelligence and American intelligence. That's kind of a bombshell. It was described as a bombshell. So you do have these battles going on, and it's at least worth a mention, and I won't elaborate on it. You can watch it for yourself. Watch Nick Fuentes' show. Look for the titles of his show. I think right now you're on like something around 1,718 might have been the most recent one. So I'm going to guess this is within the last month. Look at the titles. You can find it. Maybe it's a couple of months, but long before this started to emerge, Nick, simply by following the names, following the money, following the friendships, following the connections, following the corporations and the businesses in some situations, made it clear a while ago. Hey, you're going to see a scripted, produced, manufactured separation of JD Vance from the GOP as it is today. You're going to see this divide, and you're going to see a play to some of the groundswells that are taking place in the right wing, largely due to the work that Nick Fuentes is doing and the influence that he has. But he already said that this was probably going to happen. He already said, look, JD Vance, Joe Kent, Tucker Carlson, Palantir, Peter Thiel, Epstein, there are connections between all of these people. They have political interests. They are already entrenched in American government. They are deeply entrenched in the right wing with the GOP. And there's infighting in terms of Israel-friendly or AI-friendly or AI liberal or AI anarchist or libertarianism, like an AI libertarianism, where there's these very significant, cutting-edge, intensely interested, highly invested parties who have a vision for the future, and the only thing they share in terms of these groups that are fighting with each other is that their visions would be significant departures from where we're at right now. And that's the basis for his thesis that the true right wing at the heart of it, a nationalist America First approach, fundamentally has to take this opportunity and step into the fight. I've talked about my own motivations for doing that, even though I have no objection to and concede the good in and even the primacy of America First as an approach, especially when compared to a neocon or Israeli hegemony in the Middle East. I also have a broader perspective where I can see that playing into religious eschatology, which is already being talked about anyway. Isn't that what Hegseth does? Didn't he make this like God's war? Isn't Jerusalem now like God's country? Isn't America now God's country? Like a vassal of the Zionist movement in Jerusalem? I think I've talked about myself being a Southern California native, being one of the people who calls San Diego home, and the Zionist origins of San Diego, the incredible influence that they have, the personal interactions and dealings that I've had with lawyers, bankers, judges that are all like very Zionist, very corrupt, very fucking evil, and that I've been at war with. I think I've talked about all of these things. So this is a theme. There's definitely significant infighting going on the right, and the only thing they have in common, which somehow and in some ways the left is similar, but definitely on the right, what they have in common is their visions of America in the future are all in stark contrast to America today, and almost an indescribable contrast to America as it was in its real origins. So you do have that infighting. And when you look at this question of, well, where are the real levers of power? Is it really that they've just broken their promises? Did all of these representatives, senators, members of Congress, elected officials, did they all just break promises? Did they all just commit to doing one thing, and now that they're in power to do it with the House, with the Senate, with the presidency, with the Supreme Court, did they all have a change of heart? Did they just change their minds? Did something happen and now they're afraid to do what they promised to do? Or did they never actually want to do what they promised to do? And the reason why that question matters, the reason why the answers to that question matters, is because the presumption of where the levers of power are is at stake. If it's not that they just lied, or if it is that they just lied, the implications are the same. Here's why. If they believed in what they campaigned on, and then you voted them in, and now for whatever reason, they cannot carry out that agenda while they have the House, the Senate, the White House, and the Supreme Court, then it means that the levers of power are not in those four institutions. You follow? If I, as a senator, or a representative, or the president, or a Supreme Court justice, do not have the power, even when I have the agreement and the support of the other levers of power to carry out my agenda that I ran on or I promised, well then that's not where the power lies. You see, it's not where the power lies, if that's the case. But what if they never had those beliefs to begin with? If the senators that we voted in, or the elected representatives that we voted into the House, never really believed in the agenda that they were promising that they did believe in, if the president himself never really believed or intended to make good on the promises that he made on the campaign trail, if that's the case, well then that means that the power as it relates to you, the voter, is not in voting. You see, it's one or the other or both. If these elected officials cannot carry out the agendas that they support in keeping with the ideology that they promote and the promises that they made and the commitments that they gave to the donors that lifted them up to power, if they can't do it, then what's their excuse? Because as was pointed out by Massey and by Van Swoel, we have the House, we have the Senate, we have the presidency, we have a majority on the Supreme Court. So if they can't do it, then where is the power? If they can do it and they're not doing it, then we know it's definitely not with the voter. So then what are we wasting our time doing? For example, here's a thought. In the United States, we have laws here. Believe it or not, we actually have laws. And there are actually laws that protect us, that are supposed to protect us from corruption in our government, okay? So, for example, 18 U.S.C. 2381, that's a statute in the federal government. 18 U.S.C. United States Code 2381 pertains to treason. Treason, by definition, is conduct on behalf of an American citizen that is designed to undermine the interests and security of the United States and advance the interests of a foreign government. You got that? That's treason. That's law. If it's true, if it is true that the NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, these major household names, these media networks, these conglomerates, the oligopoly that controls a message that's given to a country in the mainstream of 300 plus million people, if it's true that they are intentionally censoring information that the American public needs as it pertains to an issue and questions of national security, the very fundamental bedrock principles that our society is built upon, founded upon, and that people are overseas ostensibly on any given day dying to protect, if it's true that these massive corporations are censoring this information, then what other reason would they have to do it unless it was to undermine the interests of Americans and America? If China is the one who hacked this database and got all this voter data, which no one's denying, by the way, the arguments are actually pretty weak. The arguments are, oh, well, you could have gotten it for a small fee. Like, okay, yeah, an American, but do we sell that information to China? Like, is that really the gripe? Is that the complaint, that they didn't pay the fee? So if they did, but never, in any case, they didn't do it. They hacked databases in the US. They stole this information, these voter rolls, and then the media is suppressing that. That's treason. Treason is one of the few federal laws that prescribe the death penalty. So think about that. If you feel that strongly, like that's the law. That is the law. So if you believe that this is a bona fide act of treason, well, then you're looking for the death penalty. You want to see some heads roll, proverbially speaking. You want to see some people die. You want to see them pay the price for their crime with their life. It's understandable that that would be a law in this country, right? Because at the founding of this country, it was something unique and different than what the world had seen to date. Not entirely, but generally speaking, fairly new. You had our states, you had a long battle and back and forth between the Federalists and the state interests, and slowly and over time, we ended up with the situation that we have today. A federal government, very large, very powerful, President of the United States who sits at the head of that, and then you have all 50 states, each of which has their own governor, has their own legislative bodies, has their own judiciaries, just like the federal government does. And in every state, you have the ability to bring litigation and claims in the federal court system that supersedes that which you would have recourse to in the state itself. Okay? You can sue the state for violating federal law. So that's the system. And this law that says that you can be put to death for committing the crime of treason, that law, well, they had good reason for doing that, because treason does represent an existential threat to the entire society and everything that it stands for. Well, what do you do when you have allegations on both sides accusing the others of treason? You have the mainstream media in a very pussy type of way, essentially accusing the President of the United States of treason, which they've also done overtly, by the way, more than once. Right? He's Hitler. He's violating the Constitution. He is operating on behalf of Russia. He is a Russian plant. He's relying on Russian interference in the 2016 election. Those are all accusations of treason, which can be punished, yes, not always with death, but it's one of the few federal laws that you could break and receive the death penalty. How serious are these two sides when they throw around these statements? And let's just assume they're deadly serious. Well, then what are the implications about the government? The government doesn't prosecute treason. We're not interested anymore. We don't need to talk about it anymore. It doesn't. Donald Trump can get sued for defamation because some woman says he raped her 25 years ago. And when he says she's lying, I didn't do that, even long after the statute of limitations expires for that criminal felony prosecution of that very serious crime, she can raise that allegation 25 years after the fact, probably 20 years or so after the expiration of the statute of limitations. And when he says, I don't know her, she's lying, he can then get sued for defamation. But you can't sue anybody for treason. You can't bring a criminal prosecution for someone who's been accused of committing treason. You know, the standard of evidence in that federal code is like 3 witnesses who could testify to the act of treason, that's the standard of evidence. There's more to it, and you can look at it, but there's treason. There's espionage, spying. That Eileen Wang, who just got arrested, and I don't even know what they did with her, but she was the mayor of Arcadia, a town with 50,000 residents, and an average income or a median income of 113,000 and a median home value of 1.5 to 1.8 million, a very wealthy, very influential sort of middle and upper class society, 25 miles outside of Los Angeles, one of the most significant and influential metropolis areas in the country. She was an actual Chinese spy, admitted, I am here. Yeah, I'm a spy. You caught me. I was giving them information. I was planting propaganda here in the US to help make China look better and to downplay some of the crimes that they were committing for the advancement of their interests, which by default means to disadvantage America. That's treason. So it still happens. People do get prosecuted for it. They just don't take it that seriously. So where are the real levers of power? What does that even really mean? And here's why it matters. Because if you're sitting there and you're thinking, what's my contribution to society? Can I really trust the influencers? Can I really, when push comes to shove, when the rubber meets the road, when it all comes down to it, is the brass tack really my vote? Because if you listen to anything that any of these groups are saying, and you take any of it even somewhat seriously, the answer is, oh, well, no, not really. Your vote, if you thought it didn't really mean anything because you're one of 140 million voters, it means even less. Because you might be voting someone into office who, A, does not actually believe in any of the ideas that they're running on and has no intention of making good on any of the promises that they're issuing. Or you could be voting in someone who wholeheartedly believes in everything that they're saying, but doesn't actually have any power to do anything. And that's the question I'll cover in the next show, which is, well, if these aren't really the levers of power, and I'm not actually saying that they're not. What I'm really saying is they're not as powerful as these people want you to think. And the reason they want you to think that they are more powerful than they are, meaning that being a representative or a senator or a governor or a president or a justice, the reason they want you to think that that's where all the power is and that that system actually works is because that's where they are. The only people trying to convince you that that's where the power is are the people who are running for positions in that environment. And the only way they win is by getting more votes than their opponent. And the only way they whip up motivation through concern and interests and proselytizing and lying is by getting you to go and cast that vote. You are the numbers. Well, what if there's other levers of power that are not mediated by some person that you don't even really know, you can never really trust, and that every single day you are reminded that they are either not nearly as powerful as they said that they would be, or they're not nearly as interested in the issues that they told you that they would take action regarding? You don't need that mediation. Or at the very least, that should not be your primary means of participating in politics. So that's the kind of stuff that we'll get to. That's generally speaking my take. My take is these people are accusing each other of crimes that are punishable by death. And it's not clear that they're not actually guilty of these crimes that are punishable by death. And although I didn't really get into the implications of that, when you have two groups openly accusing each other of committing crimes that are punishable by death, and both groups are utterly unwilling to prosecute, to indict, arrest, prosecute, convict, and execute the people that they're saying committed these crimes, then you can bet your ass it's because they're all committing these crimes. And frankly, that's far more likely than any other explanation, because it is a fact that China hacked and got 220 million American citizens' voting information. And I'll close on that point. When you get a Thomas Massey saying, oh, we didn't steal the elections, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and by the way, all the information that China stole, that you could buy that here for a fee. And then when you get the mainstream media saying, oh, Trump is being misleading, like he's not telling you all the information. Okay, there was a hack. They did steal some information, but you can get that information for free. Isn't it interesting when these politicians that would be diametrically opposed to each other, that would be like mortal enemies, that have previously accused each other of the same types of crimes for which you could be punished with the death penalty, all of a sudden not only have the same take, but express their takes in the same way on the same issue? Isn't that interesting? Still, regardless of their talking point, even if you just take it at face value, why would China hack databases in the United States and get all of that information? Well, anybody who knows, well, what do you do with demographic information? What would you do with that? Why would you hack that? So you can get them like email lists to try to sell like your counterfeit, Coach bags from China? Probably not. They want election data because then they can see where's the opportunity to swing an election. Who could be persuaded? That's what all politicians do with election data. Who could be persuaded to support us? Who could be persuaded, if not to support us, to at least oppose them? Where the only way to oppose them is to support us. Who could be persuaded to switch from their side to our side? Who and why? What issues matter to them? China would have no other reason to get that information unless they intended to use the information. And the only way to use that information is to use propaganda to influence public opinion, and therefore votes, and therefore elections, and therefore the elected, and therefore the conduct of elected officials. And what do these elected officials do? Well, if they're in the legislative branch, they draft laws. If they are in the judicial branch, then they interpret and render judgments according to those laws. And if they are in the executive branch, they uphold and prosecute those laws. So if I'm trying to manipulate American society where the progression basically leads to, this is my way of shaping policy in the United States, and I'm China, that's espionage. That's treason. Whoever let them do it is committing the act of treason. They are committing acts of espionage. And I don't even think it's limited to that. I also think that they do spend money, because I've talked about budgets on X all the time. You can see how it rolls in. They are trying to stoke these wars. Like, when all of the sudden did we get to the precipice once again of race wars? Wasn't that like Charles Manson's motive for the Tate and Bianca murders? Like, for real? That was his actual motivation. Oh, I need to start a race war. When all of a sudden did that become a thing again? Where You hop on X, you hop online, and all of a sudden you just see these choirs of voices, a bunch of black people hating white people hating black people, black men gloating about their conquest with white women divorcing their white husbands, taking half of their money or most of their money and their kids, like, and all of these like obnoxious and outrageous takes on these things, and the sexism and the wars between the sexes, and all the ridiculously worded posts that you can tell it's not even a native English speaker. You can tell it's not even written in English. It's written in some other language and then transliterated into English. You think maybe there's a connection there? Do you think maybe the fact that the mayor of Arcadia got caught being a Chinese spy and actually articulated her mission as exactly that, changing public opinion to advance the interest of China, is in any indication that, yeah, China's doing this? Or you think she was the only one? There is a solution. There are things that we can do as the rank and file, and there are things that we have been doing that is a waste of time. And there is everything in between. So let's pick up next time. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your evening, and peace out.
Bitch, are you gonna clean that shit up? Because I will smack you.
She's gonna smack you, ho.